Hello everybody and welcome to today's EAUC webinar entitled Sustainability Through Salary Sacrifice Cars, a Valued Benefit for Employees. The webinar will last approximately an hour and is in the Travel and Transport Life Framework. Thank you all for registering and thanks also to our speakers today, Alison Argall and Cheryl Clements from Tusker. My name's Kate and I'm the EAUC Member Administration Officer. A bit of information about EAUC webinars first of all. You may have previously attended or heard of exchange webinars. These are continuing, but due to their popularity, we've developed a new range of EAUC webinars. These are for EAUC members only and are an added benefit of your membership. They're more detailed with clear learning outcomes, expert speakers, and they will also allow for more complex topics. They'll all last between 1 and 1.5 hours, depending on the topic. And after the webinar has finished, you'll receive a certificate of attendance to place on your personal development file as a record of the training. Just a little bit of housekeeping to go over now. I'm hoping that everybody can hear me well. I think we've had a few issues with sound, but I'm hoping that that's sorted out. You've all been muted to avoid background noise, and you'll continue to be muted throughout the webinar. If you're having any technical issues at all throughout the webinar, please let me know by posting in the on-screen chat box or sending me an email to info@eauc.org.uk. Hopefully most of you have working microphones, but don't worry if you don't, because you'll have the opportunity to ask questions at the end. The webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded as a resource with the presentation before the end of the week. Please feel free to share these resources with any colleagues or fellow EAUC members. Once the webinar is finished, you will send a short survey for us to gain your feedback. Please take a few minutes to complete the survey as the results will help us to improve our CPD and events. That's all from me now, so thanks again for registering and I'll pass you over to Alison.
Thank you, Kate. So good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for attending the webinar. So it'll be myself and my colleague, Cheryl Clements, that will be talking you through the content today. What we are looking forward to sharing with you really is a little bit of background in terms of who Tusker are, how we work with the EAUC, kind of a little bit in terms of market information on salary sacrifice car schemes and how they operate, and then ultimately finishing up with a case study overview on a scheme that we've had in place for a number of years now at ASTON University, and an opportunity for you to ask some questions. So in terms of kind of who are Tusker, we are a traditional, historically a traditional leasing and fleet management organisation, and we kind of changed our tact a wee bit in 2008 after the budget in the April, when Alistair Darling announced changes in the treatment of lower CO2 emitting vehicles and the relevant benefit in kind. So basically an incentive for people to take lower carbon emitting vehicles. And that for us, I guess, in 2008, during the recession, was an opportunity to look at the marketplace because salary sacrifice car schemes aren't new by any means. PwC, for example, probably been doing it for about 2 decades, but that's clever accountants. So kind of our opportunity was to take advantage of the new benefit in kind tax system because the maths worked better than ever before, but also look at the marketplace about incentivizing people to look at the vehicles they were traveling in, provide a really tangible and necessary benefit in some circumstances, but also look at providing this benefit at no cost for an employer and with significant cost savings for the employee. So subsequently, since 2008, this has really become our core business now. We technically consider ourselves very much salary sacrifice car scheme specialists, and that ultimately is because we have more schemes than any other provider in the market across many more sectors, and now looking at just over 220 salary sacrifice car schemes that are up and running. and that's accessible to around 500,000 eligible employees across those customers. In terms of what that looks like in terms of growth, you'll see here from the next slide, we've seen a significant increase as people have become, I guess, more aware and comfortable with salary sacrifice car schemes, the real benefits of them, and the longevity of the proposition. So what I wanted to do really was hopefully today talk about perhaps some of the myths that are out in the marketplace surrounding salary sacrifice car schemes and dispel those as we work through what the scheme involves, how it works, and the benefits for both organisations and for your employees. So some of those myths will surround perhaps that some experiences of individuals have been that there's a lot of administration, or that people are concerned that the schemes will be highly administrative. I hope that we'll demonstrate that that isn't the case, that it is a fully outsourced proposition with minimal administration from the participating organisation. One of the other areas that quite often comes around is HMRC's view on salary sacrifice car schemes. I think, especially if there has been some press recently and speculation around salary sacrifice benefits, it's probably worth just sort of summarising a wee bit on this, that salary sacrifice car schemes aren't tax-free. They attract taxation across a number of different revenue streams for the government, that being benefit in kind, because they're tax efficient, not tax-free. VAT on the sale of the vehicles. We've got to look at road fund licences, VAT on fuel. PwC undertook a sector of due diligence for us around this sort of effect on revenue, and actually it proves that the schemes themselves actually generate revenue for the government as well. So I know that there are clearly, I think it needs to be a big differentiation between tax-free schemes and tax-efficient schemes, which we know that that is very much how HMRC have viewed them to date. In terms of implementing a scheme, I think there's often, again, a thought process that it's going to be a major project. It may be take significant time and resource from the participating organisation. Having now, as I mentioned, more than 220 schemes up and running across all sorts of different organisations and market sectors, we've very much got this down to a slick process of being able to project manage this with individual organisations, and we'll talk you through a little bit how that works. Again, I think often there can be some speculation in terms of the success of these schemes and whether or not employees will take them up. I think as we explain a little bit about what the benefits are and some worked cost examples, I think hopefully you'll see yourselves that it looks like a very interesting proposition. In terms of communicating to employees and assisting them understand the benefits of the scheme and how it works, I mean, we actually have a very extensive marketing department that we segment to business to consumer, so that actually it's very much detailed around plain speaking but informative and comprehensive communications to employees across all sorts of different mechanisms. And then in terms of value, we're again going to work through some examples to show you how the tax efficiency of the scheme works, but I think it's also important to keep in mind it's not just about tax savings. There are another number of areas that actually result in the scheme being a very compelling proposition compared to a retail deal that somebody may well be able to get individually. So, who's doing it? Well, as mentioned, we've got 221 people, different customers doing it. These are just a few examples and perhaps a little bit of information underneath in terms of quotes as to who's doing it and kind of to some extent why they're doing it. Across our customer base, the scheme works as well for corporate schemes as it does for private and limited organisations. We have schemes up across financial services, through charities, and clearly we're talking very much and working with the EAUC to promote the scheme across the education sector. I think the thing that's excited us about the EAUC and their members is that clearly sustainability is key to each of our organisations as we become more socially responsible for looking at efficiencies. We can't take out the fact, though, that ultimately, as much as cars are seen as adding to the issue, that we have to be practical about how an employee is actually not just going to get to and from work, but actually in terms of the social time as well. And the key things that tend to lead to employees needing to have a car is geography in most instances, and perhaps areas where there is poor or limited transport infrastructure. So we've looked with the EAUC to look at a range of comms across for the scheme to look at mixing car usage with public transport, cycle schemes, almost as a last resort. But ultimately we have to be aware that employees, if they're not driving a salary sacrifice car, typically they'll be driving a much older, less carbon efficient vehicle, and also in terms of less mileage, fuel efficient as well. So in terms of sustainability through innovation, one of the key initiatives that we looked at was carbon offsetting, so that we could look at a number of projects to literally offset all the tailpipe emissions across all of our salary sacrifice cars on the road. And this basically means that as an employee chooses a vehicle to suit their needs, they'll have an option to select currently 3 projects where they can fully offset the tailpipe emissions of that vehicle. 3 projects we're currently running with are in Indonesia, which is a landfill gas project. We have a project in India, which is a wind power project. And then the third one is in Chile, which is a hydroelectric project. All of this is reportable in terms of pulling through the data for you to utilise in terms of your environmental objectives. That means that it's not just pulling through the tailpipe emissions based on the vehicle and the mileage that the employee is doing, but it's also going to look at taking details of their existing vehicle, which typically, as I mentioned, will be a much higher carbon emitting vehicle, so that we can calculate the carbon footprint that's being offset across technically the new vehicle, as well as the differential between the new and the old. As I mentioned, there are significant fuel savings for an employee coming out of an older, less fuel efficient vehicle into a much more fuel efficient vehicle. Technology genuinely has moved on tenfold, and that's before we start talking about electric vehicles, which clearly is going to be providing a significant growth factor in the market. In terms of helping employees understand what cars are available and what works with them, we have What Car Reviews now that we've introduced onto the online system, and we also have a dedicated electric site as part of the system access. So employees, if they're particularly interested in looking at electric vehicles, it'll take them it'll handhold them through the whole range and managing whether an electric vehicle is genuinely going to be suitable for their day-to-day needs. We're looking at improving corporate social responsibility by getting people into the most efficient way of getting to from work and generally travelling on weekends. A lot of our schemes, we can limit the CO2 emissions of the vehicles that the employee would see on the scheme. So for example, again, technology having moved on tenfold, we're seeing CO2 emissions reducing at a significant rate across the manufacturers as they work towards the Euro standards and clearly the 2020 Kyoto. Sorry, I'm struggling for a minute to push this slide on. So, looking at sort of now in the future, I mean, technology, as I mentioned, really has moved on tenfold. So, not that long ago, genuinely, when we were launching our first salary sacrifice schemes back in 2008, we were looking at probably less than 70 cars that came in under 120 grams. As time moved on, that moved up to, as you can see, to 400, and now there are more than 4,000 vehicles available on the road through the scheme at less than 120 grams. In the marketplace, the average CO2, as you can see, has dropped significantly just between 2011 and 2014 from 149 grams of carbon emissions to 122. And actually, at Tusker, our average CO2 across the last 12 months is just 101 grams per kilogram. So we're heading towards our sub 100 very quickly. We have seen a significant growth in the availability of electric and hybrid vehicles. We now have more than just short of 250 different electric, pure electric or hybrid diesel and petrol vehicles available. And it's interesting to see so many different manufacturers now coming into the market with not just one perhaps derivative or model that people can look at, but one or two. And really what I've seen a big change in is kind of the perception of electric and hybrid vehicles going from sort of perhaps quite small vehicles through to big family and 4x4s. So BMW, you'll be aware that they have the i3 that's been hugely popular on our scheme. We've got some figures to share with you shortly. But then you look to the other extreme where they've got the i8 supercar, which is technically available on the scheme as well, which is hard to understand that the likes of Teslas and i8s are the most carbon efficient vehicles, yet supercars out on the road. Okay, so enough about kind of the marketplace, I guess, and a little bit of background on us. And I'm just going to pass you now across to Cheryl, who's actually going to talk you through more about the technicalities of the scheme and actually how that works. So I seem to have dropped my ball. Yeah, I lost it. Right. Oh, do you want to? Yes, I do. Thank you. Right.
Thanks, everybody. We're going to talk to you now about the nuts and bolts of the scheme and how it actually works. So moving on to the next one, if it's going to work for me.
Temperamental.
There we go. So this is about the employer benefit. So the main financial benefit to you as an employer is an average of £275 per annum net savings per employee. So if an employee takes a car for 3 years, then that's just over £800 for that particular employee over the 3-year period. But it's not just about the monetary savings, as Alison said before. It's about rewarding, retaining and motivating employees, because these schemes are coming more to the fore. It's about having fully outsourced scheme management. A lot of people, when you talk to them about salary sacrifice schemes, will just hear the word fleet and company cars, and it's completely different to a fleet and company car arrangement, because all of the administration and the management of the scheme and employee engagement, in fact, is outsourced to us. We have a big risk mitigation package, which I'm going to come on to a little bit later on, because mitigating the risk is obviously an important consideration for you as an employer, but also your employees, and as Alison's already said, it meets your green agenda. So we've looked at the benefits to you as the employer, but what's particularly in it for the employee? Well, again, they are going to make financial savings of around £80 per month. That's on a typical salary sacrifice scheme. But it's also about more than that. It's about a fixed inclusive package for a monthly amount, so they don't have to worry about anything for 3 years. It's a worry-free motoring, and they can budget for that. It's a first-class customer service from us because, as I said before, we completely remove the employee engagement. It's a retail feel online website that they will use to choose their cars, and it's good fun. If you'd like to have a demo login for that after this session, then please just get in contact with us and we can let you have a play with that. It is quite good fun. And again, they've got the protection as well, so that if they are going to resign or they're going to be made redundant, then we have some risk protection for them as well. So moving on to how it actually works. To comply with HMRC's salary sacrifice rules, the lease, which we never mention lease to an employee, but the lease is done directly between you as the employer and us as Tusker. So you will lease the car from us and make that car available to the employee by reason of their employment. So the employee will sacrifice the gross salary sacrifice amount from their salary, so they will save income tax and NI. But the employee will pay benefit in kind tax on the benefit because, as we said earlier, it's a tax efficient scheme and not tax-free. So therefore, the lower the CO2, the less the benefit in kind tax, so the more that the employee can maximise their saving. You as the employer will save the Class 1 NI on the amount of salary being sacrificed, but you will pay Class 1A NI on the value of the benefit, and that's quite key there as to where the lower CO2 will give you the bigger saving as well. So that's how it works. Let's have a look at what else is included. So the employee will choose their car online through the online system. That will supply them with the car, all maintenance and servicing, including all tyres, and that's a no quibble replacement tyre policy as well, because what we're trying to do is reduce the administration and additional costs for the employee, as well as you as the employer in having to manage any ad hoc invoices that are recharged. It comes with European breakdown and recovery. That's currently with the RAC. That also gives them a 48-hour hire car in case they can't be put back on the road at the roadside. Road fund licence, if they go for an ultra-low emission vehicle or electric vehicle, that won't apply, but if they do go for a low emission vehicle where road tax is attracted, we will automatically do that for them, so they don't need to worry about that. Full accident management service, that's regardless of whether they have a minor incident in the vehicle or whether they've been involved in and witnessed a potentially fatal accident. We will get them back on the road and the car as quickly as possible just to make sure that everything is sorted out. It also comes with fully comprehensive business cover motor insurance. So that's if they are driving on university or college business at the moment and they're claiming back a pence per mile, that means that your duty of care as the employer is automatically covered. That also has gap cover included, so that if there is a total loss, then any shortfall will be covered by that particular insurance. Interestingly enough, we can insure through this scheme anyone from age 17 and up, and it also provides insurance for your employee and their domestic partner automatically, but they can also add other people through the process if they wish. We also do an annual driving licence check, very important from a duty of care perspective. So once they order the car, we'll ask the employee to sign a 3-year mandate so that whilst they have the car, we can check their licence on an annual basis just to make sure that from duty of care perspective, everything is okay from that. So let's have a look at some of the example savings on the scheme. Is it going to work? There we go. So as an employer, let's take an average car of 17,000 manufacturer's list price. Let's say that's going to be taxed from a benefit in kind perspective. Apologies if you're not aware of benefit in kind tax and how that works. I'll be more than happy to talk you through that separately afterwards, but just for the purpose of this, let's assume that's being taxed at 15% and that the average gross salary sacrifice is going to be £380. So you're currently paying, as the employer, on that £380, you're paying £52.44. So after the car is delivered, based on the assumptions in the first 3 boxes there, you'll then pay £29.32 because you're now paying Class 1A NI, which is on the value of the benefit and not straightforward NI on the value of the salary. So that gives us an average saving across all of our schemes of about £23.12 per month for the employer, which is a net saving per annum of £277.44, which is where we got the 275 that we rounded down to earlier. So just as an example there, a savings example assumes that of this 3,000 eligible employees at 2% engagement, it assumes that just 60 employees have joined the scheme. So that's £277.44 times 60 employees, which is 16,646. 16,646 multiplied by 6 is 99,878. So that's assuming that each agreement runs for 36 months and that the 2% engagement happens over a 36-month period. But in reality, we typically achieve an average of between 6 to 10% take-up rate amongst employee bases over a 36-month period. So that would, of course, increase the savings substantially. We track all savings from day one, and this is reported on a regular basis so that you can then forward report internally as to what the scheme is saving. But savings are dependent on the cards that employees choose, and it's possible to see employer savings of over £50 a month, so obviously double what we see here, should an employee choose a very low emission vehicle like a BMW i3. We've got an example of that just coming up in a second. So let's have a look at the employee savings. This is using exactly the same scenario, so 17,000 manufacturer's list price being taxed on the same rate and a gross salary sacrifice of £380. The first column shows you the 20% taxpayer and the second column shows you 40%, so exactly the same, it's just different rates that the employee will be taxed at. But as you can see, from the savings and even the benefit in kind being added back in, there's a really good average monthly saving of sort of £75 to £80 a month for an employee. So it's quite compelling from a financial perspective. So having looked at those, let's have a look at the electric car, just out of interest. So this is the employer saving. This is a BMW i3, and its average P11D is 31,455. But because it's electric, its vehicle scale rate that it's being taxed at on benefit in kind is only 5%. So although the gross salary sacrifice itself is £478.65, you would be paying £66.05 Class 1 NI on the value of the salary at the moment. But after delivery of this particular car, because of the efficiency of this car, your Class 1A would drop to £18.09, which means you as an employer get a net saving of £47.93. So that almost doubles your annual saving that we looked at previously, which goes up to £600. So again, quite compelling. From an employee perspective, if we move on to that, as you can see again, we've just got the 20% taxpayer and the 40% taxpayer. It's a really good saving for them too. So the monthly saving has increased from sort of £75 to £80 to now £126 for a 20% taxpayer and nearly £150 for a 40% taxpayer. Just to explain this 40% taxpayer one here, the gross salary sacrifice is £478.65, but because of the tax efficiencies happening through the payslip, the net monthly cost of £330.04 is the amount that the employee's take-home pay would actually reduce by. That's where they're going to see the value. So they're going to get the car, they're going to get the maintenance, the servicing, the insurance, the RAC, everything that we looked at on one of those previous slides, just for £330 fixed over a 3-year period. So again, that's where the electric and hybrid cars even really come into it for both you and your employees. Moving on to the risk element that I mentioned earlier, it's a key feature of the Tusker scheme in the unique way which we help to mitigate risk. So by risk, we mean what happens to the car if someone resigns, is made redundant, goes on maternity leave, and so on. So we fully manage the risk elements to the scheme for you by including what we call protections. After an initial exclusion period, which is typically 6 months, can be lower, if an employee resigns or is made redundant, then we'll just take the car back and there's no early termination cost to be processed by you as the employer or paid by you or the employee. Now this is very different because other schemes in the marketplace will stipulate that this should be managed by the customer, so by you, in the form of a contingency type fund that invoices can be paid out from, or even via expensive externally managed insurances. So we feel that our protections remove the administration and the risk at the same time. The protection also includes a number of health conditions, so for example, diagnosis of a terminal illness or loss of a limb, or even loss of licence through medical reasons. In these instances, we'll just simply help the employee by taking the car back at no exclusion period. Maternity, paternity and adoption protection is managed differently, as the car will remain with the employee whilst they're on leave. So whilst you as the employer will continue to pay those rentals on their behalf, when they come back to work or they leave, then Tusker will reimburse you those rentals that you've paid on the employee's behalf. And that's typically the period where their pay will drop to SMP. So moving on to the implementation process. Quite a complicated slide there, which I'll leave you to read. However, the implementation process is actually fully managed by us. It's typically an 8 to 12 week process, although we do of course look to align ourselves with your requirements on timescales if that works for you. So there's an initial meeting which is on site, which typically involves all the people who would be involved, so payroll, HR, legal, etc. We'll walk through the scheme design, talk about the system integration and reporting, and then any processes and key touch points that are needed. Separately from that meeting, we have a scoping document that we'll complete to keep a track of the scheme design itself. You'll review the master hire agreement, which is the agreement between yourselves and us so that you can lease the vehicles to then make them available to the employee. You'll then approve the standard documents that we have. We can have weekly conference calls, or if you prefer on-site meetings, whatever's easier for you, just to update on what's going on. And then if you do want a final meeting ahead of launch, so we can absolutely do that. But we have a really tried and tested process that does work really well. Administration following implementation and scheme launch. There are just four straightforward touch points on the scheme, and these are very simply based on what HMRC say you need to do as an employer within salary sacrifice rules. So we've removed all of the employee engagement and administration as much as we can, just leaving you as the employer to do the following. So once the employee has ordered their car online, we will double check with the employee that that's absolutely what they wanted to do. We'll let them know what the lead time is going to be, and at that point that they're happy and we've got all the necessary paperwork in place, we'll just literally pop it through to you on an email to say, can you approve this order? We're asking you to approve the order because the lease is obviously between the University College and Tusker. So you just need to check at that point to see whether you're happy for that employee to have the car. Are they a danger of redundancy? Are they a danger of going on long-term sick, etc.? Let's say you're happy with that. We'll sign the contract hire schedule and send that back to us. We'll then send you a weekly delivery report, which will just say which cars are in order, when they're likely to be delivered. And the reason we do that is so that if anything does change, some cars can have quite a long lead time, particularly if they're a German manufacturer like Audi or BMW. If anything changes in that time, you can simply let us know and we can cancel the order. Following the car's delivery, which you have no engagement in because we do that with the employee, a salary reduction report is produced once a month and sent in to your payroll team so that they can easily see the new cars that need to be set up on the system and the new reductions. At that point, a one-off P46 is done for the change in tax code for the employee because, as we said before, it's a tax-efficient scheme, not tax-free, and it's always best to make sure that that process happens at exactly the same time. And then a monthly consolidated invoice will come in once a month, which should match the salary reduction report, and the money that you've taken is just then simply paid over to Tusker. So that should be using standard processes that you already have. There's an example of what the system looks like. Again, happy to give you demo access to our system so you can have a look. But it's a welcome screen on the driver journey, and it's the first main page that your employee will see when they log in. So moving across the menu bar at the top, if you can see that, it's quite small on my screen. The showroom is where they go to run their quotations. My car is where if they have ordered a car or they already have a car, they will be able to go in there and see it. So this isn't just an ordering system, it's a management system for the life of while they have a car. My offers they can sign up to as they go through the process. So if we get any special discounts or special batches of vehicles that we can offer at a preferential rate, then we will let people know through the My Offers system that they're there, so they go and have a look at them. The scheme policy is the terms and conditions of the scheme, and they have to accept that as they go through the process. About the scheme is a number of frequently asked questions, and then there's a contact us at the end. So just moving on as to how they do contact us. It is all about your employees. So we have, we'll give you a dedicated team that can be accessed through a support line, an email inbox. We have live chat on the website, but we also have an employee engagement team who are literally just there to handhold your employees through the process and help them with any questions that they've got. So we're not hiding behind the system at all. The website will be fully branded for your university or college, and it will really make your employees feel like they're dealing with an in-house team. In-life services management. So we've looked at the basis of the scheme, and what we do is we utilise the Tusker fleet network. So we have a number of garages up and down the country that we can book vehicles into, so that the one number that your employees will call, we'll book them in, we'll get the car picked up, taken away, fixed, brought back, and so that saves the employee from having to sort of go through that time-consuming process. We have proactive over and under mileage management, so we will watch to see whether your employees are going over or under mileage and then contact them accordingly to readjust the contract, usually on an annual basis, just to make sure that there's no excess mileage charges at the end. And indeed, if they are paying for mileage they're not using, that they're getting some money back. And they can book all services online. We even have a mobile app coming very, very soon, which will be accessed from either iPhone or Android and any smartphone or tablet. We've got lots of service points across the UK. It's all delivery and collection, as I said before, and then full maintenance support for technical issues. Quick Fit is a network for no cripple tyre repair and replacement, so it's all about us managing that car for your employees so they don't have to during the life of the agreement. From an employee communications perspective, it's about how we ensure that we maximise the take-up on your scheme. So the success of the scheme is determined by having a fully robust and effective comms process. So during implementation, we'll look to work with your existing communications channels, because why reinvent the wheel if something works really well for you already? And we'll design and produce branded comms for you to easily cascade to staff. That will be at our cost as well. We'd usually look to do a pre-launch teaser communication, and then of course full launch comms, as well as a look ahead for the 12-month period to make sure that comms are ongoing. So the most popular ones are obviously road shows, which we'd like to do following launch of the scheme. We would come along 2 to 4 weeks after the launch with some trolley key rings, pens, just make it a really fun, interactive day for your employees to come and talk to us about the scheme. But really, we are really interested in any innovative ideas that people may have for communications, because keeping it fresh is absolutely vital. So I'll now hand you back over to Alison.
Thanks, Cheryl. Okay, so just in terms of some last key bits before we take any questions that you may have. Really just wanted to look at kind of from our journey, it's all about improving, learning and taking the journey for the employee to the next level each time in terms of both service provision and also information. So just a couple of bits, stopgap cars. We introduced stopgap cars back in 2012 when it became apparent that as some excitable employees would want to come into the scheme and perhaps have an issue with no transport currently available to them, or perhaps their car was being identified as needing some significant amount of work on. So we actually now provide stopgap vehicles for employees in those circumstances that want to choose a car to the derivative and all the tweaks and nozzles on that they desire, and happy to wait for 6, 12, 20 or maybe longer weeks for the vehicle, and it just enables them to be mobile within that period. We actually don't do that through salary sacrifice. That's actually a transaction directly between employee and Tusker, and that's ultimately because lead times on cars can come forward and go back, so it, in terms of administration, it's just easier to make it a straight transaction between the two. In terms of employee communications, we've improved our offering all along the way. We now have a number of videos that employees can watch on the website, as we tend to find that they want to understand as quickly and easily as possible without that much reading as to the benefits and what the scheme means for them. The Tusker Rewards is all about enticing employees to come online to actually find out about the scheme, because without actually knowing about it, how can they make a decision? So we run a number of incentives, competitions and promotions through the online system and also through communications. In terms of multiple platform access, the system is available directly from any device with internet connection already. The mobile app is really targeting the in-life services to enable employees to have a better visual perspective of the system on a mobile device. I think we mentioned the fuel savings calculator, that actually the employee can enter the vehicle reg of their current vehicle, and the system will automatically calculate per month the fuel savings of each of the vehicles that they're quoting on, which, as we mentioned, is typically providing around a £500 saving per annum. So in terms of just some key statistics, just to give you a feel for what's happening in the market, a survey that was done by Employee Benefits, 48% of these organisations surveyed said that they were looking to implement a car scheme in the near future. They also stated that it was the fastest growing employee benefit that they'd have been recognised in terms of feedback. I think it's important there's sort of that view that actually a lot of people coming into the scheme have never actually had a brand new car, and in terms of feel good, retention and attractive benefit, that's a high proportion of people that are getting something they actually wouldn't be able to have outside of the scheme. Market-wise, they're expecting 10% of all of the car market to be provided through salary sacrifice cars by car schemes by 2025. As we mentioned, the savings are on average £277 for organisations. That, as you'll see from the i3 example, actually we see it as, albeit the scale charges are increasing, manufacturers reducing the carbon emissions just as quickly to keep dropping people into the lower bracket. So we've put some information together on ASTON University, who are actually quite early adopters, I think, as a general rule, of Cell-Sac scheme. And they actually came in and launched the scheme back in 2010. And from their perspective, they very much wanted to look at the sustainability angle. So I guess 120 grams doesn't necessarily seem massively carbon efficient when you think there are 4,000 vehicles available on there now. But actually, in terms of the average CO2, you can see it did what they wanted to do, which put it in at 114 grams, but we would expect to see that reduced massively as mentioned, our own CO2 is now pulled down to 101 grams. They wanted to use a salary cap, so actually only 20% of the employees' available salary can be used as part of the salary sacrifice calculation. Different organisations take a different view on that. I suppose ultimately people's take-home pay, they can spend as they wish, so we can be very flexible, but it's an interesting concept to look at affordability if that's on the agenda for your particular organisation. In terms of, it's not playing, there we go. Give you a feel, there was an average of 114 grams per kilogram on the scheme, and the average saving for employees has actually been £91.35 per month. So I'm going to take the last 10 minutes, I think, to see whether anybody's got any questions that they'd like to either punch in on the chat or would have to answer if you take yourself off mute. Yeah, you take yourself off mute.
Just to reiterate, if you've got any questions, you can either type them into the chat box, or you can unmute yourself to ask them online.
Okay. I'm not getting anything through the chat, Kate. So hopefully, Cheryl and I have done a super comprehensive job in giving everybody a lot of food for thought. I mean, absolutely, we'd be delighted if anybody does have any questions, or, as Cheryl mentioned, would like to chat through the scheme more, or simply have access to our online demo system to review the scheme in further detail. Then please do get in touch and let us know. I think Kate mentioned that the slides would be made available to participants, yeah?
That's right. That will be before the end of this week.
Fantastic.
I do actually have a question here in the chat box.
Oh, lovely.
It says, do you have any specific case studies from other universities that could be shared demonstrating carbon savings, etc.? For example, ASTON.
We do have other universities, but we would need to obtain the permission to be able to share sort of specific information. It's funny because since our sort of relationship with the EAUC has been developing, we're actually implementing a number of schemes within the sector now. So this time in another 6 months, we'll have an awful lot more case studies to share, because as part of our process now is to obtain permission to do case study material, and of course organisations can either decline or agree at that point, and anything that we shared would clearly be signed off by our customers first. So clearly we need to be sensitive in terms of managing the particular wishes.
That's understandable. The questioner said thank you. I could contact them directly in the meantime.
Lovely.
Do we have any more questions? No, nothing coming in the chat box. So, as you've kindly offered, if people do want to get in touch with you, they can do so and clear up any queries they may have.
Absolutely.
So all I can do is say thank you very much to both Alison and Cheryl, and thank you for all the people who registered for this webinar. And I'll now close it down.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye. Bye.